Debate sparked by claim that ancient burials cast doubt on the theory of human evolution. Unconventional data indicates that our ancestor Homo naledi was capable of complex behavior while having a brain that was significantly smaller. According to study, tombs dug by our ancestors' small-brained relatives were found deep inside a South African cave more than 100,000 years before the oldest documented human burials, which would call into question the theory of our evolution. In addition, a group of international researchers exploring the Rising Star Cave system northwest of Johannesburg discovered limestone walls with engravings they attributed to the same relative, Homo naledi, a modern-day early human. However, the discoveries, which were made public on Monday at the Stony Brook University Richard Leakey Memorial Conference and in 3 articles published online, sparked the same ferocious discussion that has surrounded H. naledi ever since its discovery made headlines in 2015. The evidence that H. naledi was burying its dead has divided experts who are not participating in the study sharply. Others claimed that there was no proof the carvings were tens of thousands of years old. Yet another expert claimed that it is exceedingly unlikely that anyone other than H. naledi would have carved the symbols given the severe difficulty required in entering the cave. The controversy highlights how much is at risk for both the reporting of more potentially significant findings and our understanding of ancient history. The most recent study, if accurate, would disprove the conventional wisdom that only members of our species, Homo sapiens, Latin for wise human, are capable of burying their dead. The South African paleontologist and National Geographic explorer in residence Lee Berger, who co-wrote all 3 studies, said, "This is a magnificent moment in human history. What will we do when we encounter another culture that is as complicated as our own?" People have asked, according to Berger. Well, you did just that. The bones of H. naledi discovered in the cave were dated using scientific methods to be between 236,000 and 335,000 years old. That predates the tombs at the Kafsa cave in Israel, which are frequently cited as the oldest known human interment at 92,000 years old. At Cima de los Huesos, Pit of Bones, in Spain, Neanderthals buried their dead 430,000 years ago. Berger emphasized that burial, however, is massively more complex and significant than disposal. He explained, "What you are witnessing here is a recurrent ritual, a meaningful reaction to the deceased. The implications are astounding given that some researchers have linked higher brain size to the sophisticated behaviors that distinguish humans from other primates." The brain of H. naledi measured between 450 and 600 cubic centimeters, which is roughly 1/3 the size of a modern person. A human brain is the size of a medium melon, in compared to H. naledi's brain, which was roughly the size of a grapefruit. Accidental deaths or planned burials? Throughout his 30-year career, Berger has faced harsh criticism on occasion for announcing or publishing results without obtaining enough corroborating data. He, in turn, has called the habit of holding off on disclosing discoveries to the general public for years elitist. The latest discoveries, he claimed, don't solely come from Lee Berger. Some of the world's sharpest thinkers make up this sizable group. In the publications, Berger and his team detail how different sediment levels are mingled around the bodies, indicating that a grave has been dug and filled. The discovery of a baby with intact vertebrae, including the pieces of each vertebra that are unfused in an infant, is further evidence cited by them. That group of bones would have almost certainly separated had the body not been buried, according to Frederick Grein, a Stony Brook University professor of anthropology and anatomical sciences who was not involved in the study. Grein added, "Much to my joy, I found the burial paper to be credible. While the new findings may not convince every academic, according to Michael Petraglia, director of the Australian Research Centre for Human Evolution at Griffith University, my view is that the evidence for interments in pits is convincing. The pits resemble Neanderthal and Homo sapiens burial sites." However, despite being pleased by the amount of labor that went into data collection, Aurore Val, a full-time researcher at the French National Centre for Scientific Research in Aix-en-Provence, claimed that she was not convinced back in 2015, and I'm not convinced today. "I believe that the evidence is not yet sufficient for us to confidently rule out alternative hypotheses that do not involve mortuary customs. For instance, according to Val, a mudflow or raindrops could have brought bones from another chamber of the cave to the one where they were discovered. However, scientists claim they have not found any geological evidence to support either theory. According to Val, People may have entered the cave in search of safety from predators or sweltering heat, only to be killed by an animal or a partial cave collapse. None would equate to burial. All would leave behind bones. Bernard Wood, a professor of human origins at George Washington University, said, "I think the evidence for deliberate burial is interesting, but I don't think it's conclusive." The difficulty H. Naledi would have had in getting its deceased 300 feet underground to the cave chambers has been a major source of debate. Passages as small as 7 inches wide must be squeezed through to reach the fall. Researchers have been able to transport cameras and equipment via the tubes, according to Berger, who had to lose 55 pounds to complete the descent and then experienced a torn rotator cuff on the way out. Furthermore, H. Naledi was only 5 feet tall, with long legs, ape-like shoulders, and hands and feet that were comparable to our own. This made for a smaller physique that was better suited for the job. Although they are smaller than we are, Val pointed out that the spaces they must squeeze through are extremely small. And yet, they have been doing this for decades, pushing or dragging a dead person in front of them or behind them. Hearths and hash marks. Claims that engravings on the cave walls were created by H. Naledi between 241,000 and 335,000 years ago, which would make them among the oldest symbols ever unearthed, did not convince the majority of specialists contacted. Theoretically, cavers in the 1930s may have carved those images into the rock, according to Wood. They have assumed that they were produced by H. Naledi. Also in an email, Petraglia stated, "I think it's entirely possible that Homo sapiens was in these caves. There is, however, no proof that anyone has accessed the chambers since the period of H. Naledi, according to specialists who have studied the cave system. I see no reason to doubt that these markings were made by the people who came into there and left the bodies," British archaeologist Paul Bond remarked in his 2016 book, Images of the Ice Age. Similar cross-hatching traces, according to Bond, were found in Gibraltar's Gahams Cave and are thought to have been put there by Neanderthals more than 39,000 years ago. In addition, he added, there is proof that some hominins were prepared to put themselves through physical hell to leave an image for people to see. He indicated some engraved images that had been found in a section of the Pergeset Cave in France that had to be entered by crawling 425 feet through a tight space. According to Berger and his colleagues, the most plausible hypothesis has been selected, and detractors must provide evidence that someone else entered the caverns and created the engravings. The statement, "This does not say, Bob was there, or, Kilroy was there," he remarked. He continued, "I am assembling with National Geographic a sizable international team of the best minds who work on both interpretation of engravings and how to date them." In a speech last October, Berger detailed discovering charcoal fragments, burned antelope bones, boulders placed as hearths, and soot markings on the cave walls, all of which showed that the early hominins were using fire for cooking and lighting. However, Berger added that because the radiocarbon method can only be used to date organic materials up to 60,000 years old, efforts to date the soot traces will be challenging. The descent described by humans who have entered the cave must have needed remarkable ability and tenacity from prehistoric hominins. Described by lead digger and National Geographic explorer Kenilo Malopayan as, "My adrenaline is pumping, my mouth is dry, and I need that last sip of water," the entry to the chute labyrinth part of the cave. Basically, it's a ground crevice with large dolomite spikes protruding from it, grasping onto you to keep you from collapsing to your death. According to Sarah Johnson, a PhD student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison who has done a dozen descents, the air is cold, dusty, and smells, like after it's rained, in the cave. The floor is also damp. Johnson said that it seemed strange to be sitting in the same spot where thousands of years ago, ancient hominins were. It's quite demeaning.